It was just an ordinary afternoon. I was at home, folding laundry, sipping my coffee, when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. A little confused, I walked over and opened the door. And there he was, a delivery guy holding the most stunning bouquet of red roses I'd ever seen. My heart instantly skipped a beat. Oh, Mark. What's this about? I thought, already feeling my face warm with a smile. You know, moments like this, they catch you off guard in the best way. Maybe it was an early anniversary surprise, or maybe Mark was just being thoughtful, reminding me how much he loved me. Either way, my chest filled with that warm, fluttery kind of excitement. After all these years together, surprises like this were rare. But when they happened, they meant everything. As I carried the bouquet inside, the sweet scent of fresh roses wrapped around me like a little cloud of happiness. My hands were actually trembling a bit, the good kind of trembling, as I reached for the tiny white envelope tucked between the flowers. My smile grew wider. This was it. That little note that would say something like, "I love you. You mean the world to me." I opened it, and that's when everything shattered. I read the words once, then twice, then a third time. No. No, no, no. This couldn't be right. The card didn't say my name. It didn't even say anything that made sense for me. Instead, it said, "I can't stop thinking about last night. Being with you feels like home. I love you, Camilla." Camilla. Who the hell is Camilla? My hands started shaking, but not in the sweet, nervous way from before. This was different. My heart dropped straight to my stomach. My mouth went dry. This wasn't a love note meant for me. This wasn't mine. My name wasn't even there. For a few seconds, I couldn't breathe. I couldn't even think straight. My brain scrambled, searching for some kind of logical explanation. A mistake. It had to be a mistake. Maybe it was delivered to the wrong house. Maybe anything but what it looked like. Clutching the card like it might somehow change if I just stared at it long enough, I rushed back to the door. I flipped over the delivery tag, practically begging for it to show a different name. But no. There it was. Clear as day. My name. My full name. My address. Perfectly correct. This wasn't the florist's mistake. Oh no. This was Mark's mistake. My husband, my partner, my supposed soulmate. And it wasn't just some careless slip-up. No. It was a full-blown confession, delivered straight to my doorstep, wrapped in roses. I stood there, gripping that card, feeling my world tilt sideways. My heart pounded in my ears, and this sickening wave of realization washed over me. Something deep inside whispered, "This changes everything." For a few seconds, I just stood there, frozen. My mind desperately tried to convince me that this wasn't real, that there had to be some explanation. Maybe the florist messed up. Maybe there was another Mark somewhere in the neighborhood, one who also happened to have a Camilla in his life. Right? Please, let that be it. But deep down, I already knew. I could feel it in my bones, in my gut. The kind of knowing that makes your stomach turn and your chest tighten like you're being crushed from the inside out. I looked down at the card again. The sender's name was right there. Clear. Bold. Mark. My Mark. My hands trembled as reality crashed over me like a tidal wave. He didn't just send flowers, he sent love. And not to me. Oh God, not to me. I scrambled, flipping the delivery label over one more time, praying, just praying, that I'd find something wrong. A misspelling, a wrong street number, anything. But there it was. My name, my full name, my address. Perfectly correct, perfectly intentional. My knees felt weak. I had to grip the edge of the counter just to steady myself. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it might crack open my ribs. No. This wasn't some random mistake. This was Mark's mistake. His betrayal. His guilt. Delivered straight to me. It's strange, how something as beautiful as a bouquet of roses can suddenly look like a weapon. A cruel, twisted joke played by the person you trusted most in this world. I paced the kitchen, clutching that card like it was some kind of ticking time bomb. My mind was racing. Flashes of every late night, every unanswered text, every sudden business trip. They all started flooding back. Pieces that never quite fit before, now clicked together with terrifying clarity. I could feel my chest tighten, this suffocating mix of rage, humiliation, and heartbreak. How long? How long had this been going on right under my nose? How many lies? How many secrets? And worst of all, how did he become the kind of man who could do this to me? And just like that, the shock started to fade. Something else, something sharper, started to rise inside me. At first, I thought the pain would swallow me whole. I mean, how could it not? The man I built my life with, the man I trusted with every fiber of my being, had turned me into the punchline of some cruel, secret joke. But after the wave of heartbreak came something else. Something sharper. Something stronger. Anger. Not the reckless kind, no. This was different. It was cold. Focused. Precise. I wiped my tears, took a deep breath, and realized I wasn't going to be anyone's fool. Not now. Not ever again. If Mark thought he could betray me and get away with it, he had no idea who he was dealing with. I grabbed my laptop. My hands were still shaking, but this time, not from sadness. I started digging. Phone records, credit card statements, old receipts. Every tiny breadcrumb he didn't think twice about. I hunted them all down, and let me tell you, it didn't take long. Dinner reservations I'd never heard of. Hotel bookings that made no sense. Little charges, flowers, chocolates, gifts that suddenly had a whole new meaning. I sat there watching the truth unfold in front of me like a sick movie, starring him. Every lie he ever told me now had a receipt to match. Every time he said, "I'm working late," or "It's just a guy's night out." Oh yeah. There it was, plain as day, sitting right there in the statements. He hadn't even bothered to hide it well. Because why would he? He thought I would never look. He thought I trusted him too much to ever question. And you know what? That realization hit me harder than anything else. He didn't just betray me. He underestimated me. That was his biggest mistake. I started taking pictures, screenshots, photos of the card, of the bouquet, of every single shred of evidence. I made folders. I backed them up. Twice. I wasn't leaving any room for doubt. Not for him. Not for me. Not for anyone. Because this wasn't just betrayal. This wasn't just heartbreak. This was humiliation. A slap in the face from the very person who swore to protect my heart. And if he thought for a second that I was going to crumble quietly in some corner, oh no, he was about to learn exactly what happens when you push the wrong woman too far. In that moment, sitting there surrounded by receipts, screenshots, and broken promises, I made myself a vow. I would not be the victim in this story. I spent the entire day planning it. And not in anger, not in some wild, screaming meltdown. No, I was calm, focused, almost eerily calm. It's funny how clarity can hit you the moment you stop begging for answers you already know. This wasn't going to be a fight. There would be no shouting, no tears, no pleading. No, this was going to be something far more memorable. I set the dining table perfectly, white linen, candles, his favorite wine breathing on the counter. The bouquet, his bouquet, sitting right in the center like a trophy. And the card? Oh, the card was framed. Yes, framed. Sitting right next to his wine glass, where he couldn't possibly miss it. When I heard his car pull up, my hands didn't even shake, not this time. I poured myself a glass of wine, sat down, crossed my legs, and waited. Calm. Composed. Ready. The door opened. I heard his usual, "Hey babe, I'm home." Like nothing had happened. Like the man who just walked through that door wasn't the same man who'd sent a love letter, in flower form, to another woman. He walked into the dining room, and the second his eyes landed on the table, I watched the color drain from his face. Completely. Gone. His smile fell so fast it was almost comical. His mouth opened, but no words came out. Just this little gasp, like the air had been sucked right out of his lungs. I tilted my head slightly, took a slow sip of my wine, and smiled. "I think these were meant for someone else," I said, my voice steady, almost sweet. "But thank you, because they helped me see everything I needed to." The silence that followed was delicious. He stuttered, fumbled, eyes darting from the card to me, back to the flowers, then back to me. Hands in his pockets, then out, then back in. He tried to speak, but all that came out were half-formed excuses, broken sentences, and this pathetic attempt at looking confused. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't even raise my voice. I just stood up, walked over to him, and with a steady breath said, "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to pack your things. And your next delivery? Yeah. It won't be coming here." I didn't wait for his reaction. I turned. Walked away. Because I was done. Done being blindsided. Done being disrespected. Done being the woman he thought would never leave. The days that followed, they were a whirlwind. You'd think I'd be drowning in sadness or curled up in bed, but no. Surprisingly, it felt like breathing again, like I'd been holding my breath for years and didn't even realize it. The very first thing I did, filed for divorce, no second guesses, no long conversations, just done. I blocked his number. Blocked Camilla's too. Yes, I found her number. And before Mark even had the chance to start spinning his little web of lies to family and friends, I beat him to it. I told everyone. I controlled the story. My story. And you know what? Watching him scramble, trying to do damage control while I stood there, calm and composed, was empowering. There was no sadness left for him. Only this burning desire to reclaim every single part of myself that I'd buried for the sake of that marriage. I threw myself into therapy, into healing, into rediscovering the version of me that existed long before I was ever Mark's wife. I started doing things I hadn't done in years, traveling, dancing, cooking meals that were just for me, no compromises, no, "What do you feel like eating, honey?" Just what I wanted. I began filling my home with things that made me happy. New furniture, new photos, new memories. Every corner of that house, the one that once felt suffocating, slowly transformed into a sanctuary. My sanctuary. My safe space. It wasn't about moving on to someone else. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about something way bigger. It was about me. About remembering that I was, and always had been, enough. A few months later, I was walking past this little flower shop downtown. I paused, watched as the florist arranged this stunning bouquet of roses in the window, and for a split second, I felt that familiar sting in my chest. But it was different now, softer. I smiled. Not because I was thinking about Mark. Not because I missed him, but because I realized something. Funny. The flowers that were supposed to break me actually set me free. I walked away that day feeling lighter than I had in years, stronger, wiser, and so proud of the woman who refused to let betrayal define her, and instead chose to let it liberate her.
Hanging up, he turned back to me. Here's what's going to happen, Margaret. First, you're going to tell me what severance package they offered you. 3 months' salary, standard NDA. Morrison snorted. Insulting. Did you sign? Yes, I admitted, this morning. Doesn't matter. The NDA is void if they materially misrepresented circumstances of your termination, which they did, by claiming you were underperforming while simultaneously using your work to secure ongoing contracts. My head was spinning. Mr. Morrison, I appreciate this, but, James, he corrected, and I'm not finished. I have a proposition for you. Just then, my phone buzzed. Alex's name appeared on the screen. I showed it to Morrison, who smiled grimly. Right on schedule. He's probably just discovered the system failures. Don't answer. My phone buzzed again, and again. Text messages started appearing. Margaret, we need to discuss the Anderson project. Call me ASAP. This is urgent. Keep ignoring him, Morrison advised, watching the messages appear. Now, about my proposition. Morrison Technologies needs a chief architecture officer, someone who understands enterprise systems, who can bridge the gap between legacy and innovation, someone with experience. I stared at him. Are you offering you a job? Yes, twice your current salary, full benefits, and a seat on our technical advisory board. But I'm too old, I said, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. Morrison laughed. Margaret, I'm 63, my CTO is 59. We believe experience isn't just valuable, it's essential. You can't innovate effectively if you don't understand what you're improving upon. My phone was buzzing constantly now. Alex had moved from messages to emails, each marked urgent. What about Nexus? I asked. The non-compete is void, along with the NDA. Besides, Morrison's smile turned predatory. After today, Nexus Solutions will be lucky to keep their doors open. As if on cue, Jerry appeared at our table. Margaret, there's a young man at the counter insisting on speaking with you. Says he's your boss. I looked past Jerry. Alex Jensen stood at the counter, his perfectly styled hair slightly disheveled, his designer shirt wrinkled. When he spotted me, he started forward, then froze as he recognized my companion. Mr. Morrison, he stammered, I've been trying to reach you. Mr. Jensen. Morrison's voice could have frozen lava. Perfect timing. We need to discuss the Anderson project, specifically, your email claiming credit for architecture you didn't design. Alex paled. There seems to be some confusion. The only confusion, Morrison stood, his imposing height forcing Alex to look up, is why you thought firing the actual architect and lying about it was a good business decision. Alex's eyes darted between us. Margaret, there's been a mistake. We'd like to offer you your job back, with a raise. I looked at my phone, now displaying 47 missed calls and messages, at my polyester uniform that smelled like coffee and French fries, at James Morrison, who was watching me with quiet confidence. No thank you, I said calmly, I've accepted another position. But, the Anderson project, the systems are failing, Blake can't. Not my problem anymore, I replied, feeling lighter than I had all day. I'm too old for that industry, remember? What happened next unfolded like a perfectly executed program. Morrison Technologies immediately terminated their contract with Nexus Solutions, citing fraudulent representation and technical incompetence. When word got out that I was joining Morrison as Chief Architecture Officer, 3 other major clients followed suit. The next morning, as I cleared out my locker at Jerry's diner, the headlines in the tech blogs were vicious. Nexus Solutions faces client exodus after age discrimination scandal. Tech giant Morrison Technologies appoints veteran architect as CAO. Startup culture's ageism problem. The Nexus Solutions cautionary tale. Jerry refused to accept my resignation until I promised to still come in for coffee. Best networking I ever did, he joked, hiring an overqualified waitress. A week later, I sat in my new corner office at Morrison Technologies, reviewing resumes. Sarah, Marcus, and Dev had all jumped ship from Nexus, bringing their experience and loyalty with them. Experience, I was learning, had a way of attracting more experience. My phone buzzed with a text from Alex, his first contact since that day at the diner. I'm sorry, I was wrong. Please consider consulting for us, name your price. I left him on read. On my desk, next to my dual monitors and ergonomic keyboard, sat Tom's photo from the Grand Canyon. I'd kept the frame but changed the picture to one taken a few days earlier, me in my new office, signing my contract as Chief Architecture Officer, James Morrison shaking my hand. The headline above the photo read, Morrison Technologies leads industry push for age diversity in tech. Sometimes being too old for one thing just means you're exactly right for something better. As for Alex and Nexus Solutions, last I heard, they were struggling to retain clients with their innovative young team. Turns out experience isn't just about adapting to change, it's about knowing which changes are worth making. Blake still hasn't figured out what a recursive function is, but that's not my problem anymore. I'm too busy leading architecture reviews, mentoring the next generation of engineers, and proving that in tech, as in life, wisdom doesn't have an expiration date. And every morning, I have my coffee at Jerry's Diner. After all, you never know who might walk through that door or what opportunities might arise from being exactly where you're meant to be, even if it's not where you expected to end up. The best revenge, I've learned, isn't about getting even, it's about getting ahead, bringing others with you, and changing the very system that tried to tell you you were past your prime. As for being too old for this industry, well, as I told the panel at last week's Women in Tech conference, the only people too old for tech are the ones who think experience is a liability. The standing ovation lasted 5 minutes, not bad for someone who was wiping tables just a month ago. The next 6 hours passed in a blur of coffee refills, sandwich orders, and dirty dishes. My feet ached, my back protested, and my mind kept drifting back to my ergonomic office chair and dual monitors. But every time I started to feel sorry for myself, I remembered Alex's smirk. Too old for this industry. Maybe he was right. Maybe I was too old for tech, but I wasn't too old to work. It was during the late afternoon lull that everything changed. I was wiping down tables, trying to remember if I'd always had this many muscles that could hurt at once, when the bell above the door chimed. Be right with you, I called, not looking up from my task. Margaret? Margaret Winters? I froze, the cleaning cloth suddenly heavy in my hand. I knew that voice. Slowly, I turned around. James Morrison, CEO of Morrison Technologies, stood in the entrance of Jerry's Diner, looking at me with undisguised shock. The same James Morrison whose company was Nexus Solutions' biggest client. The same James Morrison who'd personally complimented my work on the Anderson project just last month. Mr. Morrison, I managed, acutely aware of my polyester uniform and sensible shoes. What are you? He glanced around the diner, comprehension dawning. Aren't you the genius behind the Anderson project? The integration architecture that saved us millions in deployment costs? Before I could respond, Jerry appeared from the kitchen. You know each other? James Morrison was still staring at me. Know her? This woman is one of the best software architects in San Francisco. What are you doing waiting tables, Margaret? I gripped my cleaning cloth tighter. Career change, I said lightly. Apparently I was too old for tech. Too old? Morrison's expression darkened. Who told you that? Alex Jensen, this morning, right before he fired me. The look that crossed Morrison's face was impossible to interpret. He pulled out his phone, checked something, then looked back at me. Do you have a minute to talk? He asked, privately. Jerry, who had been following this exchange with increasing interest, gestured to an empty booth in the corner. Take your break, Margaret, I'll cover your tables. As I slid into the booth across from James Morrison, still clutching my cleaning cloth like a shield, I had no idea that this conversation was about to change everything, not just for me, but for Alex Jensen and Nexus Solutions too. The next part of this story would prove that experience isn't just about years on a resume. Sometimes, it's about being in exactly the right place at exactly the right time, even if that place is wiping tables in a downtown diner. James Morrison studied me across the booth, his expression thoughtful. The late afternoon sun slanted through Jerry's windows, catching the silver in his hair he'd never felt the need to dye despite being in the same youth-obsessed industry. Tell me exactly what happened, he said quietly. So I did. The morning meeting, Alex's condescending smile, the accusations of being unable to adapt. As I spoke, Morrison's face darkened. The Anderson project, he interrupted. Who's handling it now? Blake Thompson, I said. He's 26. Very current. Morrison's laugh was sharp. The kid who asked if our legacy systems could be replaced with NFTs? I managed a small smile. That's the one. Margaret. Morrison leaned forward. his voice intense. Do you know why I came to this diner today? I shook my head. I was on my way to Nexus Solutions to terminate our contract. The latest updates to the Anderson project are a mess. Response times have doubled. The integration points are failing. I've been trying to reach Alex all day. My heart sank. The Anderson project was my baby. I'd spent months fine-tuning its architecture, ensuring every component worked in perfect harmony. When did the problem start? I asked, already suspecting the answer. About a week ago, Morrison confirmed, right after Alex announced he was taking a more hands-on approach to project management. A week ago, when Alex had first started hinting that my methods were outdated, when he'd given Blake increasing access to the core systems. I see, I said quietly. Morrison pulled out his phone and tapped something. No, Margaret, I don't think you do. Look at this. He slid his phone across the table. On the screen was an email from Alex to Morrison Technologies Board of Directors, dated 3 days ago. I want to assure the board that the recent performance issues are being addressed. Our new team, led by myself and Blake Thompson, developed the Anderson project from the ground up. We understand its architecture intimately and are implementing cutting-edge solutions. He's taking credit for your work, Morrison said flatly, while simultaneously destroying it. I stared at the email, anger finally breaking through my professional composure. That's not just misleading, it's a lie. I have documentation proving I designed and implemented the core architecture. Every major component went through my team. I know, Morrison smiled. I kept copies of all our technical meetings, including the ones where you personally walked us through the architecture meetings Alex didn't even attend. He took his phone back and made another call. Janet, move my 4 p.m. to tomorrow, and get me Richard Chen from legal. Yes, it's about Nexus. No, it can't wait. You're just not keeping up with the pace anymore, Margaret, Alex said, leaning back in his ergonomic chair, a practiced look of concern on his face. The tech industry moves fast. We need people who can adapt quickly, bring fresh perspectives. I sat across from him in the glass-walled office, my hands folded carefully in my lap to hide their trembling. At 58, I'd spent the last 12 years of my life at Nexus Solutions, building their software architecture from the ground up. Now my 34-year-old boss, who'd been with the company barely 18 months, was telling me I couldn't adapt. The Anderson project exceeded all delivery metrics last quarter, I said quietly, keeping my voice steady. Client satisfaction was at 98%. Alex waved his hand dismissively. Ancient history. We're moving towards more innovative solutions now. AI integration, blockchain architecture. To be frank, Margaret, your methods are outdated. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd been researching AI applications in software architecture since before Alex had graduated college. The blockchain integration proposal he was so proud of, I'd written the initial framework 3 months ago. I understand, I said, though I didn't. Not really. What's the timeline for this transition? Alex's practiced concern slipped slightly, revealing a flash of satisfaction. Immediate effect. HR has your severance package ready, 3 months salary, standard NDA. Blake will take over your current projects. Blake, the 26-year-old who spent more time on TikTok than actually coding, the one who'd had to ask me last week what a recursive function was. I see. I kept my voice neutral, even as my stomach churned. And my team? They'll report to Blake now. We need to streamline our management structure anyway. He glanced at his Apple Watch. HR is waiting. They'll help you clear out your desk. As if on cue, Melissa from HR appeared at the office door, carrying a cardboard box. Young, efficient Melissa, who'd once asked me to explain the difference between Java and JavaScript. I stood up slowly, my knees protesting slightly. Age wasn't just a number, I had to admit, but it wasn't a disability either. Thank you for the opportunity, I said, falling back on decades of professional courtesy. Alex was already looking at his phone, dismissing me from his attention just as he'd dismissed me from my career. The walk of shame through the open office space was mercifully brief. Most of my team was in their morning stand-up meeting, a practice I'd instituted 4 years ago. Through the conference room glass, I caught a glimpse of Sarah, my lead developer, her eyes widening as she saw me with the box and Melissa in tow. At my desk, I methodically packed my personal items, the photo of my late husband Tom, taken at the Grand Canyon 5 years ago, the small jade plant I'd kept alive despite the aggressive office air conditioning, a coffee mug my daughter had given me, emblazoned with "World's Best Code Mother." You'll need to turn in your keycard and laptop, Melissa said, her voice professionally sympathetic, and sign these. She placed a stack of papers on my desk. severance agreement, non-disclosure, non-compete. I signed them all without reading. What did it matter? At 58, who would hire me anyway? Your personal items from the server will be transferred to a secure drive and sent to your email, Melissa continued. Once you've verified receipt, your access will be terminated. My personal items, 12 years of documentation, code snippets, architecture diagrams, all technically company property now. I nodded mutely. The security guard who escorted me to the lobby was new. He couldn't have known that I'd helped design the very security system he used to disable my access, that I'd chosen the elegant brass fixtures in the lobby during the office renovation 3 years ago, that the comfortable leather seats by the reception desk were my suggestion because I believed waiting visitors deserved better than molded plastic chairs. Outside, the San Francisco fog was rolling in, a gray blanket dropping over the financial district. I stood on the sidewalk, clutching my cardboard box, suddenly uncertain what to do next. It was only 10:30 a.m., too early to go home and stare at the walls of my empty apartment. My phone buzzed, Sarah calling. I let it go to voicemail, then Marcus from my team, then Dev. Good people, all of them, but I couldn't talk to them right now, couldn't hear their sympathy or their outrage, couldn't admit that Alex was right about one thing. I was too old for this industry, too old to start over. I started walking, no destination in mind. My comfortable flats, chosen for long days of standing at white boards rather than fashion, carried me past gleaming office buildings where other technology companies hummed with activity, places I might once have applied to work, places that now would see only my age, not my experience. 3 blocks later, I found myself outside Jerry's Diner, a modest establishment wedged between a boutique yoga studio and an artisanal coffee shop. The hand-painted sign in the window caught my eye. Experienced server wanted immediate start. Experienced. The word hit differently now. In tech, experience was a liability, but maybe here. The bell above the door chimed as I entered, still clutching my cardboard box of corporate memories. The diner was half full with late breakfast customers, the air rich with the smell of coffee and bacon. Help you? A man in his 60s, presumably Jerry, called from behind the counter. I glanced down at my business casual outfit, charcoal slacks, navy blazer, sensible shoes. Not exactly waitress attire, but what did I have to lose? I saw your sign, I said, approaching the counter, about needing an experienced server. Jerry looked me up and down, taking in the cardboard box, the office clothes, the barely concealed desperation in my eyes. Got any restaurant experience? I worked as a waitress through college, I admitted, 35 years ago. To my surprise, Jerry grinned. Good, you know what real work feels like then. When can you start? I glanced at my watch, the expensive Apple Watch Alex had mocked as being wasted on me because I only used it to tell time. Right now? And that's how I found myself in the bathroom of Jerry's Diner, changing into a spare uniform he kept on hand. The polyester pants were a little short, the white shirt a little tight across the shoulders, but they'd do. I stored my cardboard box of corporate memories in Jerry's office, carefully placing Tom's photo on a dusty shelf. The register's old school, Jerry warned as he showed me around. No fancy touchscreen. I smiled for the first time that day. I can handle it. After all, I'd written point-of-sale software systems more complicated than this. You don't deserve to call yourself our son. My father's words cut through the evening air of our family home, the same home I'd just saved from foreclosure 2 weeks ago. I stood there, stunned, as my mother sat silently at the kitchen table, refusing to meet my eyes. My name is Marcus Turner, 32 years old, and until this moment, I'd believed that family meant supporting each other unconditionally. I'd spent the last 10 years building my software consulting business, living modestly despite my success, always ready to help when my family needed it, and they had needed it, more times than I could count. I'm a disappointment? I asked quietly, my hand still gripping the folder containing the latest bank statements. After I just paid off your debt. Dad's face reddened. We didn't ask for your charity, and now you're throwing it in our faces. Acting like you're better than us just because you have some money? I looked down at the folder, remembering the day 2 weeks ago when I'd walked into Meridian Bank and paid off their $90,000 debt, credit cards, personal loans, and the second mortgage they'd taken out, all of it cleared. I'd done it quietly, without fanfare, wanting only to give them a fresh start. That's not what this is about, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I'm worried about you, the gambling, the credit cards. It's a cycle that needs to stop. How dare you? Dad slammed his fist on the table. I don't need financial advice from my own son. Your sister never questions our choices. She understands respect. Ah yes, my sister Amanda, the golden child who could do no wrong. Despite living off our parents' dwindling resources at 35, the same sister who had called me in a panic 3 months ago, begging me to help save our childhood home from foreclosure. Amanda doesn't question you because she benefits from your poor decisions, I said, finally letting some anger seep into my voice. She's been living rent-free here for 5 years, watching you spiral into debt. Mom finally spoke, her voice thin and defensive. Your sister is going through a difficult time. She needs our support. And who's supporting you? I countered. Who's making sure you don't lose everything? Dad stepped closer, his face inches from mine. Get out. Get out of this house and don't come back until you learn some respect. I looked at him, really looked at him, the father who had once taught me about integrity and hard work, now consumed by pride and denial. Something inside me shifted, a final thread of hope snapping clean. Okay, I said simply, turning toward the door. I'll go, but remember this moment. Remember that I tried to help. We don't need your help, Dad shouted after me. We never needed it. As I walked to my car, I could hear Amanda's voice inside, already comforting our parents, probably spinning this into another story about her ungrateful brother. I sat in the driver's seat, my hands shaking slightly as I pulled out my phone. The email I'd received that morning was still open, notice of default, second notice. Despite my paying off their previous debts, my parents had already taken out another loan, falling right back into their old patterns, but this time, they'd borrowed against the house itself. I hadn't told them I'd been monitoring their financial situation, hadn't mentioned that I'd set up alerts for any new loans or credit applications in their names. They'd managed to rack up another $45,000 in debt in just 2 weeks, a feat that would have been impressive if it wasn't so tragic. I started my car, but instead of heading home, I drove to my office downtown. It was time to make some calls and put a plan into motion. My parents had made their choice, refusing my help while simultaneously destroying their future. Fine, if they wanted to learn the hard way, I would let them, but I wouldn't let their pride destroy our family home, even if they never knew what I was about to do. I spent the next 3 hours in my office, making calls to financial institutions and my business attorney. By midnight, I had everything arranged, a new LLC created under a different name, funding transferred, and instructions given. When the foreclosure notice inevitably came, and it would come soon given their spending habits, I would be ready. They wanted to reject my help, that was their choice, but they had no idea who would be showing up at that auction. As I finally drove home that night, I thought about the family photos still hanging in their house, 25 years of memories, of birthdays and Christmases, all at risk because of pride and poor choices. Well, those memories would be safe, even if my parents never knew who really saved them. 2 months. That's how long it took for everything to unravel. I watched from a distance as my parents missed payment after payment, as the bank notices piled up, as Amanda continued to enable their behavior while crying poor herself. I received regular updates from my attorney about the foreclosure process. Each time my parents took out a new credit card or payday loan, I knew about it. The total now exceeded $120,000, more than they could hope to pay back on Dad's postal worker pension and Mom's part-time bookkeeping job. They didn't try to contact me during those 2 months. No calls, no texts, not even when they received the final foreclosure notice. Pride, it seemed, was more important than salvation. The auction was scheduled for a Tuesday morning at the county courthouse. I arrived early, dressed in a plain black suit, just another bidder among the dozen or so people gathered in the austere room. I sat in the back, hat low over my eyes, waiting. At 9:45 a.m., my parents walked in with Amanda. They looked smaller somehow, defeated. Mom was crying quietly while Dad stared straight ahead, his jaw clenched. Amanda kept patting their hands, probably promising she'd find a way to help, the same empty promises she'd been making for years. They didn't notice me, why would they? Their son was just a disappointment, remember? The auctioneer began his spiel, describing the property, outlining the terms. When the bidding started, I waited, let others make their initial offers. $150,000, $175,000, $200,000. Finally, when the bidding seemed to be winding down at $225,000, I stood up. $300,000, I said clearly, my voice carrying through the room. My parents turned at the sound of my voice, their eyes widening in shock. Amanda's mouth fell open as she recognized me. $300,000 going once, the auctioneer called. Dad started to say something, but no words came out. $300,000 going twice. Mom's hand flew to her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Sold, to the gentleman in the back. I walked to the front of the room, passing my stunned family without a glance. As I signed the paperwork and handed over the cashier's check, I could feel their eyes on me, could hear Amanda's whispered, "Oh my God." They were about to learn that sometimes the biggest disappointments come with the most expensive lessons. The silence in the courthouse hallway was deafening. I stood by the water fountain, reviewing the final paperwork with my attorney, Sarah, when I heard their footsteps approaching. "Marcus," my father's voice, smaller now, without its usual thunder. "Son." I turned slowly, facing my family for the first time since the auction. Dad looked aged, the lines around his eyes deeper than I remembered. Mom clutched her purse like a shield. Amanda hovered behind them, her expression a mix of calculation and fear. "What are you going to do?" Mom asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Where will we go?" I studied them carefully, remembering all the times they dismissed my concerns, rejected my help, chosen pride over practical solutions. "You have 30 days to vacate the property," I said, keeping my voice professionally neutral. "Standard procedure." 30 days? Amanda stepped forward, her designer purse swinging on her arm, probably another gift from our parents' credit cards. "You can't do this to them. They're your parents." Interesting. I turned to face her directly. Where was this concern when they were drowning in debt? When they were taking out payday loans to cover your car payments? Sarah cleared her throat softly, reminding me to stay calm. We'd prepared for this confrontation. "Marcus," Dad started, his face flushing. "If this is about what I said." "This isn't about what you said," I interrupted. "This is about what you did, and what you'll keep doing if nothing changes." I pulled a folder from my briefcase and handed it to them. "This is every loan, credit card, and financial obligation you've taken on in the past 5 years. The gambling debts, the cash advances, the home equity loans, all of it." Mom's hands trembled as she opened the folder. "How did you?" "I've been tracking it all," I explained. "Every time you opened a new credit card, every time you borrowed against the house, even after I paid off the first round of debts, you went right back to the same patterns." "That's none of your business," Amanda snapped. "You had no right to spy on them. Someone had to pay attention," I shot back. "Someone had to care enough to watch them destroy themselves." Dad leafed through the papers, his face growing paler with each page. The total amount was highlighted at the bottom, $237,000 in various debts, not including the house. "I don't understand," he muttered. "It can't be this much." "But it is," I said quietly, "and it would have kept growing. The gambling, the loans to cover the gambling, the new credit cards to pay off the loans. A perfect spiral that would have ended with you losing everything anyway." "So your solution is to make them homeless?" Amanda's voice rose sharply. "To humiliate them?" I turned to Sarah and nodded. She pulled out another folder. "This is my proposal," I said, handing it to my father. "A lease agreement. You can stay in the house. We don't need your charity," Dad started to say, but Mom grabbed his arm. "Robert, please, just listen," I continued as if he hadn't spoken. "You can stay in the house under certain conditions. First, all existing credit cards are cancelled, every single one. Second, you agree to financial counseling and gambling addiction treatment." "I don't have a gambling problem," Dad protested weakly. I pulled out my phone and opened a document. "Last Tuesday, you spent 6 hours at Golden Gates Casino. Thursday, 4 hours. Saturday, from 2 p.m. until midnight. Would you like me to continue?" The color drained from his face. Mom's grip on his arm tightened. "Third condition," I pressed on. "Amanda moves out, gets her own place, pays her own bills." "What?" Amanda shrieked. "You can't." "I can and I will. This enabling stops now. All of it." Sarah stepped forward, her professional demeanor a stark contrast to the family drama unfolding. "The lease agreement is month to month. Any violation of these conditions results in immediate termination. The rent is set at market rate, but with a significant portion held in escrow. If all conditions are met for 12 consecutive months, that money will be returned as a savings fund." I watched as the reality of their situation sank in. They had no choice, no other options. The house they'd lived in for 30 years now belonged to me, and these were my terms. "How dare you?" Amanda's voice shook with rage. "After everything they've done for you." "Everything they've done for me?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You mean like maxing out credit cards to pay for your failed business ventures? Or remortgaging their house to cover your temporary financial setbacks?" I turned back to our parents. "You have 24 hours to decide. Either accept these terms or start packing. Your choice." As I walked away, Mom called after me. "Marcus, please, we're still your family." I stopped but didn't turn around. Family doesn't watch silently while their loved ones self-destruct. Family doesn't enable addiction and financial suicide. Family tells the hard truths, even when it hurts. The next 24 hours were the longest of my life. I sat in my home office, staring at my phone, wondering if I'd pushed too hard. Maybe Amanda was right. Maybe this was too cruel. But then I remembered the folders full of debt documentation, the countless nights I'd laid awake worrying about them losing everything, the way they'd thrown my help back in my face, choosing denial over recovery. At exactly 3:45 p.m. the next day, my phone rang. It was Mom. "We'll do it," she said quietly. "All of it. The counseling, the credit cards, everything." She paused. "Your father, he's agreed too. He's scared, Marcus. We both are." "Good," I replied, relief washing over me. "Being scared means you understand what's at stake." "Amanda's furious," she added. "Says she'll never forgive you for this. Amanda needs to grow up and stand on her own feet. She's 35. Mom, it's time." There was a long silence. Then, "When did you get so strong, Marcus? So certain?" "When I realized that sometimes love means being the bad guy. Sometimes it means doing the hard thing, even when it hurts." "We'll sign the papers tomorrow?" "Yes. Sarah will meet you at the house at 10 a.m. Don't be late." As I hung up, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. This was just the beginning. The real work would come in the days and weeks ahead. But for the first time in years, there was hope. Hope that my father would face his addiction. Hope that my mother would stop enabling destructive behaviors. Hope that Amanda would finally become self-sufficient. And hope that someday, they would understand that everything I did out of love. The next morning, I watched through my office window as my family arrived at the house to sign the papers. They looked different somehow, smaller, but also more real. The facades were cracking, the pretenses falling away. It was time to rebuild, not just the finances, but the trust, the honesty, the genuine connections that had been buried under years of secrets and denial. My jaw tightened. "What happened?" "Your mother reported it immediately, as per our agreement. She chose the lease conditions over enabling your sister." "That's significant progress, Mr. Turner." It was progress. Expensive, painful progress bought with destroyed relationships and endless sleepless nights. But progress nonetheless. After signing the lease agreement, my parents had stuck to their end of the bargain with a dedication that surprised me. Dad attended both financial counseling and GA meetings. Mom joined a support group for family members of gambling addicts. They submitted to weekly credit checks and monthly budget reviews without complaint. Amanda, as expected, hadn't taken her forced independence well. She'd moved in with a friend, claiming I'd ruined her life. The last I heard, she was working as a retail manager, her first real job in years. I maintained my distance, monitoring their progress through Dr. Mitchell and Sarah. It wasn't that I didn't want to see them. I just knew that too much contact too soon could disrupt their recovery. Then came the call that changed everything. It was a Tuesday evening, just like that fateful night 6 months ago. But this time, when my phone rang displaying Dad, my heart didn't fill with dread. "Son," his voice was different, clearer, steadier. "Can we talk?" 20 minutes later, I sat across from my parents at their favorite diner, Neutral Territory. Dad looked healthier, the haunted look in his eyes replaced by something calmer. Mom's hands didn't shake as she stirred her coffee. 182 days clean, Dad said without preamble. "No gambling, no secret debts." "Your mother's been keeping count." "I know," I replied softly. "Dr. Mitchell keeps me updated." "Marcus," Mom leaned forward, "we've been doing a lot of work in our counseling sessions. About patterns, enabling behaviors, and accountability." Dad cleared his throat. "I owe you an apology, son. Not just for what I said that night, but for years of not being the father you deserved." I felt something tight in my chest begin to loosen. "Dad, let me finish," he held up his hand. "You tried to help us, tried to show us we were heading for disaster. Instead of listening, I let my pride nearly destroy this family. Called you a disappointment when the truth is, I was disappointed in myself." Mom wiped a tear from her cheek. "We've been going through our bank statements from the past 5 years. Really looking at them. The amount of money we wasted, the opportunities we squandered, and all while you were trying to save us from ourselves." "I didn't do it to punish you," I said carefully. "The house, the conditions, it was the only way I could think of to force real change." "We know that now," Dad nodded. "Dr. Mitchell helped us see it. You didn't take our home away, you saved it. Saved us. The waitress arrived with our orders, 3 slices of apple pie, just like we used to share on Sunday afternoons years ago. There's something else, Mom said, pulling an envelope from her purse. We've been saving part of what would have gone to gambling and credit card payments. It's not much, but, she slid the envelope across the table. Inside was a check for $15,000. Mom, no. That's your emergency fund. It's the first repayment, Dad interrupted. For the original $90,000 you paid off. We know it's just a fraction, but it's a start. We want to make this right. I stared at the check, feeling tears prick at my eyes. It wasn't about the money, it never had been. It was about them finally understanding, finally taking responsibility. Keep it, I said, sliding the envelope back. Put it toward your future. That's all I ever wanted. Marcus, Mom's voice cracked, we miss you. Miss having you in our lives. Could we start over? Before I could respond, the diner's door chimed. Amanda walked in, stopping short when she saw us. For a moment, nobody moved. Then, to my surprise, Mom spoke up. Amanda, we were just discussing family accountability. Would you like to join us? Amanda's face went through a range of emotions before settling into resignation. Yeah, she said quietly, pulling up a chair. Maybe it's time I did. Over the next hour, we talked. Really talked, without the old defenses and denials. Amanda admitted she'd been wrong to depend on our parents for so long. Dad spoke about his gambling addiction with raw honesty. Mom acknowledged her role in enabling both of them. And I finally told them how much it hurt to watch them self-destruct, how desperate I'd been to find a way to help that they couldn't reject. 2 weeks later, I arrived at the house, their house, my house, our house, for Sunday dinner. The first of what would become a new tradition. The living room had been transformed into a budget planning station, with spreadsheets and financial goals posted on the walls alongside family photos. Dad proudly showed me his 1-year GA plan. Mom had started teaching basic budgeting classes at the community center, turning her hard-learned lessons into help for others. Even Amanda had signed up for financial literacy courses at the local college. As we sat down to eat, Dad raised his glass of water. To second chances, he said. And to the son who loved us enough to be the bad guy. Mom reached for my hand. Are we still a disappointment? I squeezed her fingers, remembering that awful night 6 months ago. No, I said truthfully. You're a miracle in progress. 1 year later, I transferred ownership of the house back to my parents. Not as a gift, but through a carefully structured purchase agreement they'd developed with their financial counselor. They'd insisted on buying it back, part of their commitment to maintaining their newfound financial responsibility. Amanda had moved into her own apartment, started a small online business, and was managing it responsibly. She'd even started dating someone new, an accountant, of all people. The day we signed the transfer papers, Dad pulled me aside. In his hand was his 1-year GA chip. I want you to have this, he said, pressing it into my palm. Because without you, I wouldn't have earned it. I looked at the chip, then at my father, my proud, stubborn father who had finally learned to accept help, to admit weakness, to embrace change. Keep it, I said, closing his fingers back around it. But promise me something? Anything, son. Promise me you'll remember that sometimes love looks like an auction paddle. Sometimes it looks like a hard truth. And sometimes, he finished, pulling me into a hug, it looks like a son who refuses to give up on his family. As we joined Mom and Amanda in the kitchen, I looked around at my family, scarred but healing, damaged but rebuilding, finally facing reality together. They weren't perfect. Neither was I. But we were learning that real love isn't about enabling or avoiding conflict. Sometimes, real love means being strong enough to be the villain in someone's story, until they're ready to write a better ending for themselves.